The following show has been recorded over the phone, therefore the audio quality will sound different from our previous episodes.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, listeners, friends and colleagues, and anybody listening in for the first time. Thank you very much for joining us. We've got another episode today, and we've got a real star in attendance today. Angela Gittens, who's the Director General of ACI World, so that's Airports Council International. And Angela, it's a great pleasure to have you on board. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
No, believe you me, it's our pleasure, Angela. Angela, can I ask, just for all the listeners now, if you could be so kind and just give us a little bit of background about yourself. Obviously, I know all the positions and responsibilities that you've had, but if you can let people listening know, and what you actually do as the Director General of the Airports Council International.
So Airports Council International has a twin mission of representing airports on the world and regional and national stages with governments and the other players in the aviation ecosystem. And so I direct the operations of the World Office, which deals with the International Civil Aviation Organization, the International Air Transport Association, and the other global organizations that deal with the aviation ecosystem. My background is airports. I used to run the Atlanta Hartsfield International Airport, got it prepared for the 1996 Olympics, which at the time was the largest Olympics ever, with countries that had been under the Soviet Union for the first time participating under their own names. And later ran Miami-Dade aviation system, which includes Miami International Airports. And in between, I worked for a company that runs airports on a private basis, a private or management contract basis. And I led the transition of Luton Airport from a government-run airport to a privately managed airport, which it still is, and at one point worked for a consulting company heading up their strategic airport business division. So I'm all airports all the time.
Very good. And I've just got to say, with a little bit of a coincidence there, I lived in Atlanta and Miami. And I was there. Yeah, I went to Atlanta 1 or 2 years before the Olympics, and had the privilege of attending the opening, the closing, and several of the events. It was incredible, fantastic.
It was incredible, yes, indeed.
And
the airport
that's
was very easy to use, right?
Pardon?
And the airport was very easy to use, right?
Oh, it was incredible. It was fantastic, and I used to go in and out quite a lot. During the Olympics, and at that peak time as well, it ran like clockwork. It was almost like Disneyland.
Well, we worked hard to get it there.
No, you did a great job, and I remember that's when they gave Muhammad Ali the medal.
Yes, that was wonderful.
I was there with my son. It was an incredible feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, amazing. Okay, so you've got a huge portfolio there, especially with interface with ICAO and IATA, especially at the moment, I would imagine. Are you involved?
Almost daily.
Very good. Are you involved now with, obviously, every country and every government has got their own concerns and problems with the controls. But from a global perspective, obviously the airports need to keep open to keep the supply chain running.
Yes, and that's something that we've really been trying to get governments to understand, that the airports you can't shut down for the most part because you need to keep the supply chain going. But the airports are suffering greatly because most of their income comes from passenger volume.
Exactly.
And in some airports, there's little or no passenger volume. And so the airports are bleeding to death and need the help from government to keep these people paid. Obviously some people have lost their jobs already, but airports need skilled employees to carry out the operations, and it's becoming dire. And we're not seeing, this is not something that's going to pass in a week or two. We're looking at least at another month, and depending on the area, longer than that. Yeah.
No, Angela, I think in some of the areas that are being affected now, so just obviously Europe is the tsunami is coming from Asia and moving across. I think Europe and obviously the States going to have some very, very difficult times now over the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Well, Europe is becoming very close to Asia Pacific in terms of losses of passengers and losses of revenue. Our estimate just for the first quarter, we see that Asia Pacific is down in terms of the number of passengers, some 39%, with Europe at 24%. But when we look at the whole year, we're looking at Asia Pacific being down 42% and Europe being down 35%. Indeed, worldwide, they're almost all in the 30s, and we're looking at an overall figure of some 38% down in terms of passengers.
Yeah, and that's gonna keep creeping up every week that it carries on with the blocks and the closures.
Well, I think there's kind of two elements that are related. One, obviously, is the virus itself, and the closures and restrictions that are due to the virus. But then the second is the recession that's going to occur and probably has already started due to the drop in economic activity, which is caused by the restrictions and the virus.
Yep.
And how long that lasts. First we need to know, of course, how long the virus lasts. What will be the criteria for saying, okay, we flattened the curve and now we can start bringing back economic activity. We don't know yet. The scientists, I don't think, know yet when that would be. And then that's going to determine how long and how deep the recession is going to be. And that's one reason, besides the airports themselves, we are beseeching governments to take care of these workers and their incomes, because the longer they go without income, the longer the recession will be. For the whole economy as well as for the aviation sector. People who don't have money can't travel.
No, exactly. But do you think, Angela, one of the things that I think is going to happen, and I've been talking to a lot of people now about what I keep terming as the new normal, and it's going to be very, very different from all our yesterdays. And people obviously they don't know what it's going to look like, but they've got ideas of how it will happen. But I think a lot of old practices and travel, it's going to change because of the process. So I think there'll be things like a health passport that will be brought in for people to either show that they've had it and that that they're healthy, so that they can travel wherever and do whatever. And then there'll be a second or a third or even a fourth level, which will either limit people's travel until such time as either more people have got it and become immune, or until a vaccine is produced, which probably isn't going to be for 9 to 18 months. So I think there's going to be a huge fear element that's going to influence the passengers back onto the aircraft.
Well, I think that to the extent that there is that kind of health passport, if we can get the testing scaled up, if we can get the serological testing where we see that someone actually has immunity, has antibodies, and we can have something like a health passport, that would help bring back confidence. It's with this particular disease, more than some of the others in the recent past or in the last 10, 15 years, the twin characteristics of a long incubation period, which we don't have in some of the others like the Ebola or the Zika or the H1N1 and SARS, and then the absence of symptoms while someone is communicable, even without the incubation period, which they still don't know how long the incubation period is, but even during the disease process itself that there are a lot of people that are asymptomatic or with very minor symptoms. And so the fear factor of you have no idea that the person standing next to you may have this, or the person that touched something 2 hours ago had it. These are very unusual characteristics of a communicable disease, which, adds to the fear factor.
Exactly.
And has added to the variability in countries or even cities and how they are, how and when they decided to manage this. So it's a very odd combination of very unfortunate circumstances.
Yeah, no, the word, you can't say the word often enough, unprecedented. It's incredible, huh?
Yes, exactly.
Now, can I ask you something? Do you, like, for me now, and it's not trying to be smart with hindsight, but when you see something that has had the effect it did when it first came to light, and you've seen what had to be done to try and get it under control, my feeling is that people seem to watch it too long and think maybe it won't be so bad when it gets to us. And I think the delay, that could have been, things could have been done a lot quicker. But as often as not, it depends on financial issues, and people are always reluctant to spend as freely as they've had to do now. But they could have done things a little bit earlier if they had been a little bit more agile and more prepared.
Yeah, I think it was not until the situation in Italy, where it was not connected to China, and it went very fast, is what galvanized the world. And even so, there was still a lot of variability in sort of how deep the mitigation efforts went. So, I agree with you, and I think, as long as you think of it as a flu, and we have flu all the time, it was difficult for people to make some of those decisions in view of the economic impact. And the economic impact is massive. I mean, it's not something like, well, we shut down for a week. When you're telling people they can't work, either because they're not allowed to, or because there's no money to, because there's no customers. When you're talking about that for an extended period of time and putting economies into recession, that's a big decision to make. And I think it's not until you really balance it against the deaths, so it's not just people getting sick, but people dying, that, one after the other. And frankly, there are still some countries that have not or have decided not to put in mitigation measures and are not taking this seriously.
Yeah, which is terrible.
Which then itself leads to travel restrictions. The idea would have been that this was coordinated kind of at a global level. So if every country or most countries did the same thing, you wouldn't have needed as much of the border closures and travel restrictions, because there would have been more confidence that the folks that were traveling didn't have the disease.
Exactly.
So, it's something to learn from. But frankly, if something like this, something different, but with some similar characteristics would have happened again, I don't know yet that the big we, have figured that out. That,
I think you're
right. Even now, WHO says that travel restrictions themselves are not necessarily effective once the disease is in your location. That it's just not necessary anymore. But obviously you need to scale up the testing. And I'm assuming that the testing is effective. I just saw something that said that there's some study, and I haven't read the study. I haven't, read any further than the paragraph that came across my iPhone. That 1 out of 3 people who have the disease, test negative. Now, if that's the case, and apparently it's a preliminary study, if that's the case, the recovery of the economy and the lifting of restrictions is going, and getting the health passport, as you mentioned, is going to be very tricky.
Blimey, it's. I mean, it's certainly trying so many curveballs, huh? Yeah.
But I mean, I think there will be a vaccine. I think that some of the safeguards that we normally would use to certify or allow vaccines will be somewhat relaxed, so that something can happen sooner. There will be that. So this will be over at some point, or sufficiently managed. Whether it'll ever be over, I don't know, but sufficiently managed, like the flu is. But the damage will take years to recover from.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's going to be you're 100% right there. Now, something like as far as the new normal. Do you think now that the airports, and especially airports are always great at dealing with regulatory directives or if a major incident has happened? So as far as then dealing with that crisis in front of them, they've had certain experience and they've done well. But unless somebody has actually lived through a crisis and seen what happens, they don't know whether their own crisis plans or their own risk and mitigation, etc., is actually good enough and robust enough. Now, I also feel that an awful lot of C-suite teams will be looking a lot closer at their capabilities to deal with crisis in the future than they ever did before.
Yes, and we, as ACI, one of the things we do is, I say we represent airports, but we also help airports do their best by providing guidance, by sharing best practices, doing analyses that help them. And so, for example, we have a business continuity handbook. We have an emergency preparedness handbook. We have policy handbooks that talk specifically about health emergencies. And we have reissued those, actually made them free to all of our members, again, so that they can go back and relook at what they're doing. We also, because this is, the 21st century, we also issued an advisory bulletin on cyber, on IT and cyber. Because, the IT resources are critical enablers these days of every part of airport operations, maintenance, and management. So we've issued something on that. And the airport, the airport operator, the percent of employees at the airport that actually work for the airport operator is pretty small, anywhere from 5% to 50%. So what airport managers have to do is get all of the employers, all of the role players on the airport on the same page when it comes to certain activities, and this, in this situation, that comes more to the fore than ever. So the airport manager had to have already established the relationships so they can call upon them to manage during this crisis. Now, one of the real issues here is those stakeholders and those role players are suffering greatly because most of them depend on passengers as well. Either aircraft movements or passengers or both. So they're hurting. and their employees, they're laying off employees. And then the employees that they do have, to the extent that they can't work at home because they have to be at the airport, then they have to be protected. So that's why this is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. We've seen drops in traffic, like with 9/11. We've seen big increases in costs, like after 9/11 and after the liquid issue, the volcano, that they shut down operations, but nothing like this.
No, it's absolutely amazing. Now, representing airports, and airports obviously passenger driven, and it's always anybody that's had anything to do with cargo, it's always a little bit of a stone in the shoe, and about the retail business for passengers. Are airports, or do you think airports will be thinking more now about redesigning, waiting areas, shops, etc., because of the continued social distancing, or social distancing to a degree? Do you think that will happen, or things whereby people won't want to spend so much time in an airport, and they'll try and do more just-in-time travel arrangements where they get there, quite late check-in, go through quickly and try and get on the aircraft as quick as possible, rather than taking up what people used to do, almost like vacationing in terminals?
Well, remember, though, that started, getting to the airport early started after 9/11 and after the liquids issue, because the security screening was a combination of unpredictable and long. And we, meaning airports, have already been trying to work on smoothing out that process so that there was more walkthrough. I mean, this is for the future, and we're not doing it now, but more walkthrough, trying to improve the security screening process so it's faster. But what happened was, because people were getting there early, more and more airports paid more attention to the commercial side, because rather than just seeing people as a captive audience, they saw them as consumers. Yeah. And so started to have very attractive retail and food and beverage offerings. So, so we're not depending on the need to get there early. We're depending on the desire to get there early. Now, kind of depending on the to what extent social distancing will be a longer-term trend, and I'm not sure it will be. It'll be a trend for probably a year, if not longer. Until there are vaccines, until there are tests, until there's the health passport that you're talking about. Yeah. So I see that as kind of delimited. And if you think about how long it takes infrastructure to be completely rearranged, there's still airports that are in the midst of rearranging their infrastructure because of 9/11. So that's not so easy to do. So I don't know that the time frames for how you rearrange infrastructure is going to match up with the time frame on the concern about social distancing. I think it's too early to see that this is a long-term trend, and there's, I think, other things that can happen. As I say, the testing, the vaccines, the health passport could all happen a lot faster than you can change most airports.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it's good that all the bodies, or the representative bodies, trade organisations, etc., are getting together and being more collaborative and cooperative. And you mentioned ICAO and IATA. I think the more they get together now and speak with one voice and start supporting each other, instead of almost being like children vying for attention of parents, I think it's a really, really plus point. Absolutely. If that can be achieved when it comes out the other end,
And we've said to governments, the parents, treat us all equitably. And really it goes even beyond aviation, because the travel and tourism, we're also working with the World Travel and Tourism Council and the United Nations World Tourism Organization, because the destinations, which is the reason people fly, they're not flying to be on an airplane, they're not flying to be at an airport, they're flying to go to a destination or to go home from a destination. So, we need help in those sectors as well. It is indeed an ecosystem.
Yeah, and let me just throw another question to you now. Obviously, the way the various countries have responded has also got certain influence with the culture that's in that particular country. And some cultures are not as receptive to being told, you must. I've spent almost 6 years in Saudi, and colleagues that are there at the moment, there's they're not allowed out. They're not allowed out. They've got to be back in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 7 o'clock in the morning. But people are seeing, positive results as a result of that, and they're tolerating it, they're accepting it. And if you look at what happened in Korea, and you look at some of the other countries, whereas some of the countries that we would call more freer in spirit, they're not learning as quickly as they should. So do you think in the future that there'll be more point-to-point between O&Ds that are of the like-minded and certain controls, rather than, as it is now, there's a lot of focus on certain hubs?
Well, I think that's going to depend on how long this stays, this particular virus and its contagion stays an issue. If 2 years from now there's been a vaccine and there's routine testing, no, I don't think there'll not be any impact at all. If not, yes. I think if this or other kinds of diseases, wind up in our lexicon for the future, then you're going to see people make decisions about where to go, where to put their businesses, based on the perception of that country or that city, management of disease.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough. And like trade lanes at the moment, everybody knows roughly where things come from and where they go. And now I think people are going to look over their shoulder and think to themselves, something, we've got to be a little bit more self-sufficient and not as reliant on such few markets as they were in the past. Do you see that sort of influence coming up?
Yeah, I do. I have heard that. We'll see how long that lasts as well, because, those things are driven by price.
Yeah.
And so,
and the throwaway society,
Yeah. So, I think certainly for a while people are much more cognizant of where the supply lines are, and I think there will be more of a desire to have trusted supply lines, including perhaps in one's own country. How long it lasts, I don't know.
And spreading the risk for one thing, but also supporting your own economy to a certain degree. But to do that, there's going to have to be a lot more awareness and information to allow people to make the choices that they want to make. And if that's the case, then something that I found very interesting at the moment, if you go back 3 months or 4 months, you've got people debating on each side of whatever party is in or opposition about, costs and keeping costs down there. Now they've had to throw those books completely out the window. So I'm hoping that in the future there'll be a lot more funding for things like the healthcare workers, and I think we both said, how much appreciation and recognition and respect we have for the frontline health workers and everybody else that keeps the front line in place. I mean, they're doing an incredible job, and if anything, They should not be forgotten after this. And the reliance and, bringing people out of retirement and getting extra volunteers, those people should be given such a positive reception in every way after this, and put certain values in place, And I don't like to have any political bias one way or the other, but I do feel that the amount of monies that have been spent on military and everything else, there's no army can stop this, and no world history period has been affected collectively like this. So I think there needs to be a little bit of a balance, and maybe whichever god people worship, whoever it is, whether it's a he, a she, or whatever, they've looked down and said, something, you guys need a little bit of a warning shot. And
and look at what probably has been one of the easiest places to cut if you're a government is public health, right?
Yeah.
What's public health? We don't need that. And they've been the sort of the Cassandras of this. Had they been listened to early on and taken seriously, we might not be in this fix.
Exactly, and also making sure they had the right levels of PPE, and there's been books that have been written 10, 15, 2 years ago, about potential pandemics and whether people were prepared for it. And sometimes when people say things enough, it almost seems to happen itself. So I think people have got to learn now, moving forward, big time.
Well, the whole issue of resilience, that's what you started out by saying, that resilience kind of wasn't respected. With kind of the just-in-time philosophy, which was rewarded in the stock market. But look where we are.
Yeah, exactly. And the amount of steps back people have to look for now to see what the horizon really looks like.
Yeah. But we'll see, let's make a date 2 years from now. We'll see how much this learning gets institutionalized.
Yeah. No, you're on. That'll be a good one. And another thing now, like working from home, how's that affected your organization?
Well, actually, we're doing pretty well. Luckily we have, this technology that helps us stay in touch. And we're obviously very busy. We've had to lay off people because, we're a member organization, and, our money comes from members, either from the assessments or from products and services that we offer. And members are suffering greatly. So we've had to lay off some people and put some staff on reduced workload, which then, of course, puts more workload on the staff that's remaining. But we've long been an organization that we travel a lot, so we've had to learn to work remotely anyway. Most of the staff had laptops. Much of the staff, certainly the professional staff, works remotely a lot anyway because they're on the road. So that has been working. Knock on wood. Let me find some wood here. That has been that has worked pretty well.
No, good, yeah. And I also think that's going to be quite positive, because people always used to say, you've got to get a work-life balance. And I think there's going to be a big switch now from to a life-work balance. And if people can see that working from home, you don't have to be suspicious of the staff, whether they're going to spend enough hours, etc. If they can see that it works and the staff can see that it works, it's a huge saving in travel time. It gives people time back with their families, their friends, to do things socially. It also saves them money in commute, which in turn, helps the environment. I think it's a really positive thing. And it also helps companies with costs because you don't need as much office space, heating, etc. So, I think there's a lot of mileage in this remaining and becoming a real good fixture for the future, which means we've got to get more savvy with digitization and automation, etc.
I think you just have to be careful, and there are companies that all or most of the staff work remotely, but you do have to be careful. One reason we were able to work well together remotely is that we had worked well together when we were together.
Yeah.
So, if we were just starting this way, I don't know. I'm not sure that it would be as productive and collaborative as it is now. But that remains to be seen. Certainly, when we all get back together, I think we can do even more remote working, as long as we make sure that we kind of structurally set up ways where people can physically.
Yeah, it'll be like pulling a car. You have to pull into a garage every now and again to get fueled again. And I think it has to have a fine balance where people know who they're talking to, who they're working with, who they collaborate with, and having a team spirit. I definitely agree. Yeah. But I think that also makes people look forward to that as much as it makes people appreciate that they can have the freedom to work from home as well and be productive and also, be recognised.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So there's please God, like always, there's some good that comes out of it. And when you see the humble stories and the hospitable and the way people look after their neighbours, and there's some really, really positive things that just shows how good humanity can be at the worst of times as well as at the best of times.
Well, as they say, it's an ill wind that blows no good.
Yeah.
Some good. We better hope that some good comes out of this.
Oh, no, please God, I'm sure there will be. Now, listen, can I ask you something? What do you think the new normal is going to look like?
Well, I think, number one, there won't be a new normal for quite some time. Unlike some of the other disruptions, which have tended to be V-shaped, this is looking more hockey stick shaped. I don't think there's going to be a kind of a rebound.
Yeah.
We're already starting the preparations, sort of the planning and mental preparations, at least, for the recovery. And some of the issues are, what will be the criteria for a recovery? And, what will cause you to open your border? And when you open it, it's going to be to, these countries or those countries.
Yeah.
So I think that getting to a new normal will take, 2 years, 2+ years, because, again, it depends on how long the recession is.
Yeah.
Because that in itself is abnormal. But on the other side of this, I think, and, as we were kind of saying, I think there'll be much more attention paid to health and hygiene.
Yeah.
Than there has. If we're going to be in a global world, which, there's sort of no going back, then there's got to be, and there are standards. The WHO, the World Health Organization, has standards. There's international health regulations. And I think...
But it's enforcing them. It's enforcing them. That's the difficulty.
Exactly. And just like ICAO some 10+ years ago started to get much more focused on implementation. And so, folks like us at ACI, we started doing what we call airport excellence, peer reviews on safety, on security, on environment. I think you're going to see that same kind of thing on health and hygiene.
And do you think now that something as terrible as this that can affect the whole world so quickly, do you think that there'll be a sort of a weighting value on health and hygiene, and that there'll be certain restrictions put in that if you don't meet a certain level, then other parts of your environment, your culture, everything that goes on within your country won't be allowed to be passed over outside of your country?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I think there'll be certifications, or or the like, whatever you want to call it, that will be published, and that countries will pay attention to, and whether it's air rights or trade rights, and all of that. And I think it's going to be necessary.
Yeah. Same with climate control and things that people used to mock and not take so seriously. Now all of a sudden it is.
Well, it is some places. It's still not everywhere. And we don't actually know how this started. For all we know, climate change may have had an impact on how this happened. I don't know. They have not found the animal yet that originated this animal to human jump. So there's still a lot that's unknown.
Yeah, no, too much unknown, and too much different theories coming around from everybody, and untruths and all sorts. But please God, when they do get to the back of it.
Yeah, the other thing we advocate is that people go to the WHO, to their local national health authorities, and do not pay attention to the stuff that comes over their Facebook or their their emails. Everybody and their brother-in-law has a theory.
Yeah, and it's going to get worse and more creative the longer people stay inside.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Angela, can I ask you, just before we finish, if you had a magic wand, what 3 things would you like to see happen in tomorrow's world?
I would like to, if you're talking about truly tomorrow, I would like to see every government have a guaranteed income for workers who are out of work because of this particular crisis. I'd like to see that not just this crisis, but that every country take, we'll call it health insurance. It's not necessarily insurance, but take health insurance and public health seriously.
Yeah.
Because we're all affected by it, and it's one thing to say, okay, if you were affected by COVID-19, then we'll give you a break on the rent. We'll make sure you get health care. You don't have to make your mortgage payment this month. Well, why isn't that done for other conditions when people are in a reduced circumstances for no fault of their own? So, I would like to see a world where this notion that we're all in this together actually starts to mean something. Then thirdly, I want everybody to get back on airplanes and go travel around, see the world.
Yeah, but I think there'll be a lot of, like I said, there'll be a lot of sensible and also deep thoughts on where people go and for what reason in the future.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And there's an awful lot.
I think we've seen that before. There's long-term trends that arise because of events, and I think we'll see it in this case.
And I think, private aviation is going to see a bit of a boost as well.
I'm sorry?
Private aviation.
Well, that's just so much on the margin because of cost. People who are flying Ryanair can't suddenly, make a reservation on a private airplane.
Oh no! I know it's not going to be for the masses, but those that can, I think they'll seriously look at all the benefits of from check-in to social distancing to whatever they consider to be security. I think a lot of people will think twice about what they used to do.
Well, they may think twice, but their ability to use the alternative, I think, just realistically not be there. Yeah. I wouldn't say that that's going to be a major trend. And, I think it might be a minor trend, but certainly not major.
Yeah,
the commercial aviation as a form of mass travel is only possible because of safety and cost.
Yeah. But I do think now some of the extra activities and regulatory criteria is going to focus on the bottom line, on the cost, and people are going to have to accept that certain things have to happen, and when those things are in place to maintain the excellent levels of safety and security in air travel, it's going to increase the price.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just that price increases will cause demand decreases, and that's just that's just a fact. But but I agree. I think health and hygiene is going to go in there with it's part of safety.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Right. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
And really, really appreciate everything that you're doing on behalf of the community, and also the interaction with the official bodies, especially ICAO and IATA. It's definitely important that everybody starts singing from the same song sheet. And I know how hard you work, and also the positions that you've held. Got a lot of respect for what you've done, and also the Atlanta connection now is fantastic.
And Miami.
And Miami, yeah. But I've got what I did for the family. We did the bricks, in the wall and on the path at the Olympic City.
Oh yes, so did I.
Yeah, so my daughter who flies with British Airways, she went back and she found the bricks, and it's good, it's lovely.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful talking to you, and let's
likewise
get to the other side of this.
Yes, indeed, and let's meet up in a couple of years and see how things are. And look after yourself, stay well, and thank you so much again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.